A second. Okay. And record here. Go to the cloud. Hi everyone, Tashi Dilek. Shima is with us right now, and she's the co-host of this class.
Okay, great. All right. So let's start with the meditation. Okay. And then visualize in the space in front of you our object of refuge in the form of Buddha Shakyamuni, who's inseparable from your Lama or your Lamas. And then to strengthen our motivation, think that you're surrounded by all sentient beings. Or in essence, just like us, wishing to be happy and not wanting to suffer. With a mind whose nature is the same as that of the Buddha. And so based on the understanding that all their faults, their shortcomings are merely temporary, let's generate affectionate love. A mind that is fond of all sentient beings and deeply cares for them. Based on a feeling of closeness and acceptance. And then let's focus in particular on all the temporary shortcomings, limitations, and other faults leading to endless suffering, and generate great compassion, an affectionate mind that sincerely wishes for all sentient beings to be free from these dissatisfactory states and their causes. And that moreover wishes to protect all sentient beings from these. And that mind then gives way to the altruistic attitude that is now determined to give our time, to give our energy towards helping sentient beings to overcome all their suffering and its causes. A mind that is willing to take personal responsibility for the welfare of all sentient beings. Since that is realistically only possible if we become fully enlightened first, let's generate the mind of enlightenment. Let go of any self-centeredness and set instead the ultimate mind that cherishes all sentient beings in the form of bodhicitta. While also thinking it is for the benefit of all sentient beings that will continue to study the Precious Garland. So with this in mind, let's recite the prayer. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits, practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. I go for refuge until I'm enlightened to the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Supreme Assembly. By the accumulation of merits of practicing generosity and so forth, may I become a Buddha to benefit all sentient beings. Okay, great. Okay. So the Lamrim outlines, let's start with the Lamrim. We started already last time with refuge, but let's continue with refuge since that is the gateway to the Buddhist teachings. Now, we know that the gateway to the Mahayana, to the universal vehicle, is bodhicitta, but the gateway to the Dharma in general, of course, is taking refuge. And I briefly talked about it last time, but then today, let's look at the outlines from the Lamrim that teach us about the causes, the reasons or causes. In Tibetan, actually, the word reason and cause is sometimes used interchangeably, though they don't literally mean the same. But here, what are the causes? What are the reasons for taking refuge? Well, dread and caution regarding our existence in samsara. So first of all, being reborn again, 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 and again. I mean, if you think about it, even if we're born as human beings, everything we had to go through in this life, well, it'll all start all over again. And the worst is we're born again, not able to speak, not able to even turn around. I mean, as a baby, the very least, not able to communicate and so forth, and have to learn everything again from scratch. So if we really think about this, do we really want to do this again and again and again, even if it's in the human realm? And of course, the kind of suffering we may experience if we're reborn in one of the lower realms. And in general, the dissatisfactory experience of our existence, the constant danger of something worse happening. We're never safe. And even if we have a relatively easy life, well, the suffering of aging, the suffering of sickness, and eventually death, well, we won't be able to avoid these. And to just think about this. So the dread and caution, it's not about running away. It's not about a kind of fear of like a panic. I just don't want to suffer by no means. Now, of course, we may have to suffer, we may have to accept it. So here, dread and caution is more this instinctive sense I want to avoid suffering. So that's a healthy kind of attitude. There's nothing wrong with it. It's not obsessive, it's not extreme. So that is definitely one cause. But for that, we need to become aware of the nature, the suffering nature of cyclic existence, this prison we're in. And then, of course, a second cause is the conviction or confidence in the ability of the triple gem, in particular the Dharma, to protect us, to guide us. Guide us. It's probably a bit of a, yeah, in terms of what I said last time, I don't know a better word, but it's more like guiding us so we can protect ourselves from these different types of suffering. It's not like they protect us directly, but it's rather that they show us how to protect ourselves. So taking refuge is really about Buddha Dhamma Sangha showing us, guiding us in the attempt to protect ourselves. Because the word for taking refuge, remember last time I said in Tibetan, it's actually it's protect, to seek protection. All right, so that's something to reflect on and to just check. Well, every time we take refuge, because taking refuge, of course, doesn't mean to just recite the words, but instead it's this attitude. So do these two causes, do we have these two causes? Are we wary of cyclic existence? Have we really reflected on the shortcomings, on the limitations, on the fragility of our existence? And at the same time, do we have a sense the Dharma in particular can protect us from these? All right. So that's about the Lamrim. And then we still had we had one question left. Yeah, here it is. So Jimmy still had a question I didn't answer last time. Oh no, I also didn't Okay, so just one thing about Orid's question. So I ask you about the kleshas, which klesha is just the Sanskrit word for the English word mental affliction. I think affliction itself is probably not enough. I mean, to sometimes talk of just affliction is fine, but really here it's a mental affliction that needs to be stressed, that's the case. Sometimes also described as delusions or afflictive emotions. And someone said, and I think it was Orit maybe who said last time, well, it's difficult because the terminology is so similar. So you have affliction and you have afflictive obstructions or afflictive obscurations. So then Günther from Germany, he suggested to use the Sanskrit. To use some Sanskrit terminology. Well, here we have klesha. It definitely sounds different to afflictive obscurations. But I don't know if I use the Sanskrit when I talk about klesha, I should also use the Sanskrit when I talk about afflictive obscuration. And that is klesh varana. So you again have the klesh in there. So it's hard to avoid that. In Tibetan, nyumong is delusion or is affliction or klesha, and nyuntip, nyun, so the first syllable of the word nyumong is nyuntip, dip, or tip, is the word for afflictive obscurations. Anyway, then Shmuel, he also sent a message, because I said last time, I asked all of you, well, do you understand the difference between those two? And at the time, I think people weren't really sure. As of the difference, like what is the difference between afflictive obscurations and afflictions or mental afflictions? What's the difference between the two? I did write about it. Orit, was it clear in what I said on page 20 or something? Do you want to go?
Well, I didn't get to page 20. I think I'm like
Okay.
number 8 or something. I listened to the first 2 lectures or teaching classes, but I didn't have time to.
Okay. All right. Well, the thing is, of course, yeah, I don't know how much time you really get, all of you get, but that's what the material is for. I mean, to make some time, if you just read a page every day, I mean, it's not that much. So I want to request you to use the material in that way. If you don't have the time, I mean, I could also shorten it, of course. I could just put together a few notes instead of writing whole sentences. If that is more comfortable, I can try that. Maybe it's just overwhelming, all the explanations that are given. And these are actually more given in the beginning. As we continue to go through the verses faster than we're going through them right now, there'll be less explanation because we've covered already a great deal. Maybe sometimes I get a little carried away to try to include too much. But anyway, it's a work in progress. So let's see. Shmuel also suggested, he said, well, we're not used to memorizing. Okay, that's true, but we can get used to it. I mean, if you look at some of the apps, like brain training apps, I think you're all familiar with them. You've got them on tablets and phones and so forth. You can download them. Well, they're actually mind training apps, and many of them have memorization as part of training the mind, training the brain, training the mind. So this is a great opportunity to just memorize some of these ideas. I mean, of course, as part of our studies, we were used to memorizing because you couldn't go to the debate ground without doing so. But even if you don't debate, if you don't, I don't know, have discussions and so forth, well, to just memorize some of the basic ideas. Um, I can't find Shmuel. Oh, here it is. What did Shmuel say? He says we're not used to it. Yes, it's not part of the education system to memorize, but in a way it is. We do have to memorize. I mean, how do we take exams unless we remember what was said in class, for instance? But of course, this kind of structured memorization we're not used to. But it's a great exercise. I mean, it's great. It helps you to remember your shopping list, if you're trained in memorization, it helps you in so many other ways. So one way would be to to write down the most important ideas that you learn and just memorize them. Everything else is so much easier. And if we try to bring the Dharma into our daily life, we walk around in the supermarket, we drive in a car, we're with other people, we're at work, wherever we are. If the Dharma is, if we haven't memorized to a certain degree the ideas that are set forth here, how do we remember them in daily life? How do we remember these methods? And memorizing gives us a better sense of of how everything is connected. So it's all right there, and it's easier to reflect on things. Of course, debating and talking about them anyway, but just reflecting on them. So this is typical, for instance, when you meditate on the Lamrim. If you meditate on the Lamrim, the first thing practitioners usually do is memorize the outlines. So you have it right there. You don't need to look for things. You don't need to check in the book and so forth. And that's pretty straightforward. It's pretty easy. It's just a few outlines. A few. I mean, okay, it's more than just a few, but you go through them step by step. So in the same way, start memorizing a little bit if you really want to learn the Dharma and bring it into your daily life. Just a little bit every day, a line or two every day. That's 365 a year. Um, okay. So we're not forced, I don't force. So he says, now my feeling is that in Western education system, as the student progresses forward, he or she is not forced to review the material. And maybe I should force everyone to learn the material in the beginning. Well, let's see how it goes. Ask you more questions, possibly. And when it comes to spirituality, there's a tendency to jump to vague discussions on profound topics rather than a systematic approach step by step. Yep, I agree, absolutely. And teaching debate is the answer. Yeah, well, I wished it was really easy to teach debate, but of course, teaching debate's actually not that difficult. Getting you to do it, that's difficult because you have to make time every day, at least 5, 6 hours to get together and debate. 4 hours of debate and then preparation. It's totally up to everyone else. Do you have the time to do so? And I guess as especially lay practitioners, it's difficult to make that time. And even if you're ordained person, I'm sure you have other commitments and it's not easy, but it's totally up to you basically. And there are courses, of course, but even the classes that are happening right now, progress, of course, is only slow because people don't have that much time. Okay. Anyway, I'll keep that in mind and try to quiz you more. So, okay. I'm not going to get into Jimmy's question, I'm afraid, or maybe, well, let me do Jimmy's question, and Orit, if it's okay, I'll do yours next time. You disappeared from the screen. Anyway, so okay. Orit, I hope it's okay if I do yours next time. So this is a question about the death dissolution process, and I said next time, that which is today. I will go through this. We will do the meditation together. Jimmy asked me to do it, and so we'll do it at the end of this class. But he says, as I understand it, only taking the 3 bodies into the path conjoined with the dissolution process meditation is a tantric practice. Okay, yes. The death dissolution process alone is an ordinary experience common to everyone. Yeah, it happens to everyone. Subtlest possible clear light mind conjoined with the subtlest possible materiality element. I guess you mean the subtle energy wind. So yeah, the subtlest possible mental consciousness called clear light. That's the kind of subtlest state. And well, it's experience for everyone, tantric practitioner, ordinary person, the same. It depends on the tantric practitioner, how far they are in the practice. I mean, if they learn to utilize the clear light mind, the experience is different. But in general, yes, for a beginner in terms of tantric practice, an ordinary person, arhat, it's the same. All right. So the only difference is the subtlest material element would then appear to a tantric practitioner as the celestial mention. All right. So yes, for a tantric practitioner, if they're practicing generation stage, it's not just no, not generation stage, sorry, completion stage tantra. So, and even okay, yeah, so even within generation stage tantra, what you do practice is to focus on the clear light mind and then arise as the deity, though you're really able to do this on the higher stage, so on the completion stage of tantra. So to visualize you rise as the deity. So, and when you're actually able to do so, you do so when you're highly advanced on the completion stage, then actually the subtle material or subtle winds, they rise as the deity. The mind arises in the form of the, well, Dharmakaya. So you rise as the Rupakaya of a Buddha or Sambhogakaya of a Buddha. No, actually, when you rise in the later stage, then it's the Sambhogakaya of a Buddha, Rupakaya of a Buddha, and your mind rises as the Dharmakaya. Anyway, without saying much more about this, so that is the case, but that everything else is not the case. So this subtle energy wind does not appear as an ordinary person to an ordinary person as the 6 realms. No. It's the energy wind in our body. So the energy wind in our body that right now exists through our body, that is responsible for many different functions. Well, that has arisen from the subtle energy wind that on which the subtle clear light mind rides. So when we die, we remain in the clear light mind for some time, and that subtle wind, then the mind, of course, becomes then later on the coarser mind. This is based on what His Holiness says. His Holiness says the subtlest clear light mind is the substantial cause of the coarser minds. Maybe not everyone agrees, but I remember talking to Yangden Rinpoche one day. I was translating for him, and he said that His Holiness always says this. I'm not sure in public so much, but anyway, so it makes a lot of sense to me that this very subtle clear light mind, that is this substantial cause, it gives rise to the coarser types of mind. Likewise, the very subtle energy wind, that gives rise to the energy in our body. For an arhat, also it doesn't arise as the four great elements. It remains as the subtle clear light mind. Sorry, the subtle energy remains as that subtle energy. And so, no, it doesn't appear as the four great elements. So the mind that in the arhat, when they pass away, what happens is the body and the mind separate. So they're the body that is still the samsaric body, they leave that behind, of an arhat who has in this lifetime attained liberation, of course. So they leave this body behind. And now they remain, well, yeah, I guess in that subtle, in that clear light mind. Though, no, I don't think they actually, I think they do experience the clear light mind of death, but they're also not able to hold it because they've not practiced. As an arhat, you don't practice focusing on the clear light. I mean, you don't engage in tantric practice, in short. So their mind becomes coarser again, and then they focus on what is it called? They focus on their cessation, the cessation of suffering. So remain in that state until, of course, they arise from that state. They're inspired by Buddhas who communicate with them that there's more work to be done, and then they arise from that meditative state. That is not, I don't think it's the subtlest clear light mind, to generate bodhicitta, to take on a body, a subtle body that allows them now to accumulate more merit and to enter the Mahayana path. So although they don't have any aggregates anymore, well, they have arhats. It's taught that the arhats do not have any aggregates. Well, they don't have any coarse aggregate. They don't have any samsaric aggregate anymore once they passed away. But they don't, like, I guess I said, I don't think they have the control. They have learned to stay in that very subtle clear light mind. They haven't learned to do that. They also arise from that again, and probably coarser states of mind will manifest. And they don't remain in this state of mind focusing on emptiness or focusing on, usually in the text it doesn't say they focus on emptiness, but they focus on the cessation of suffering. But of course that is an ultimate truth. So I guess, yeah, focusing on emptiness, there's no contradiction that the same mind also focuses on emptiness. It focuses on having eliminated all afflictive obscurations, and they don't remain in that state forever. No, every arhat will eventually become a Buddha. Okay, so this was just a short explanation. It was a long question, but I hope it's clear that it's really just the Mahayana tantric practitioner, a person who's highly advanced. Well, even like I said, on the generation stage, you go through the meditation, you go through the notion, you visualize all this, but that's just a visualization. But once you reach the completion stage of tantric practice, that's when you can actually arise as a deity. And what is the substantial cause for that? It's the subtle wind. But then no other being is able to utilize the subtle wind in any way, in that very same way that I just explained. Okay, all right. So I'll continue with the questions next time. I spent so much time last time, so I want to do this a little faster today. Okay. You got the new material. My apology, it took a little longer than expected. Okay. I'm still not entirely sure where we got to before I had to take this long break. Does anyone remember where we got to before well, when was it? In September sometime before I had to take a break? Does anyone remember? else? I don't. What page were we on? No one?
So I recall myself asking a question whether the cognition of higher rebirths, whether the belief in higher rebirths must be preceded by the belief in higher rebirths or the belief in the highest good, which comes first. So judging by this,
yes.
if I'm correct, at least then that's what I remember.
Okay, great. Yes, I remember you asked that question. All right, it's not easy. Does the belief in liberation and do we first believe in liberation and enlightenment before we believe in higher rebirth or in rebirth in general? Well, no, let's say higher rebirth. Okay. So that relates to, okay, so just quickly say this much since we got here. In terms of arising, so as I mentioned before, the sequence of anything that is set forth in the text is always considered extremely important. There's always a lot of attention paid to what comes first, what comes next. Because pedagogically, psychologically, there's a difference, of course, what is presented first. If it's easier, it's usually presented first. I mean, it's the same as going to school. What you study in first grade is easier than what you study in second grade and so forth. So in the same way here, a lot of attention is paid to exactly this order. And there are two ways in general by which is determined which order, I mean, by which an author in a text determines what to teach first and what to teach second. Two reasons or two criteria. One criterion is the order of their arising. What comes first, what comes second. So in a way, a chronological kind of order, if you want, if you like, or ontological order. That's one kind of sequence. And the second sequence, of course, is the epistemological sequence, the way you come to understand something. And in this case, in the first case, it's just chronologically. In the second case, it's what is easier, what is easily understood. Now, in the case of highest rebirth and high rebirth, and the highest good, which are liberation and enlightenment, the three goals. So everything in Buddhism is aimed towards these three goals. Buddhism, although it's a science of the mind, it's a system of psychology, it's all that, but at the same time, it has very specific goals. Of course, happiness, etc., but this kind of happiness, lasting happiness, can only be accomplished if these three goals, or I should say two goals, if we just talk about higher rebirth and highest good, or three goals if we talk about higher rebirth and liberation and enlightenment. So that is basically, these are the goals. That's what we're aiming for. And right now, it may not be as tangible because we're very much attached to samsara, of course, and our samsaric goals. But if we learn more about it, reflect more on this, slowly there'll be much more of a sense or much more of a desire, of a wish, may I reach these goals. Okay. Now, with regard to the arising, first, from the point of view of result and cause. We speak here of causal and resultant, the causal aspect and the resultant aspect. What is the resultant aspect when it comes to these three goals? Well, it's the three goals themselves. So from the point of view of reaching these three, of course, first is higher rebirth, and then we can attain liberation and enlightenment. But that's from the point of view of just the states themselves. But of course, also from the point of view of the causes that we need to practice, that which we need to put into practice, that which we need to train ourselves in. Again, the causes for higher rebirth, which is virtuous actions, these prepare the mind for the causes of liberation and enlightenment, in the sense that, well, virtuous actions, of course, virtues because of the motivation, because what the intention behind them, actions that are not guided by self-centeredness, but by cherishing others, by love, compassion, and so forth. So any kind of action that arises from these intentions are virtuous actions. And they prepare our mind for the causes of liberation and enlightenment. Because, well, if we have a really strong a mind that is very self-centered, a mind that is very much controlled by the afflictions, it's very, very difficult to realize emptiness. It's really difficult to generate bodhicitta and so forth, as we know. Okay. So having said this, from the point of view of the arising, liberation, highest rebirth is explained first, and then what's it called? Liberation and enlightenment. Okay. So this, I guess it's pretty clear. But then the order is reversed, and this is really important. Less in the context of this text, but more in the context of philosophy in general. Okay, this starts from here. The sequence of cognizing high rebirth and the highest good. So it's important to understand, first of all, well, cognizing higher rebirth or the highest good is not a prerequisite for seeking rebirth in the human or celestial realm. We don't have to realize it. We don't have to incontrovertibly understand it. It's enough to have faith. Faith, I mean, conviction, being convinced, having confidence in their existence, of course, based on reasoning, based on our experience. But it doesn't have to be understood, incontrovertibly known. But of course, it's beneficial to do so, to know, so understand higher rebirth, to understand enlightenment. This is why, for instance, the second chapter of the Pramanavartika is taught. To really understand enlightenment is possible, liberation is possible, enlightenment is possible, that there is rebirth, that there are going to be rebirth. I mean, there's going to be a next life and so forth. Because the degree of our conviction determines how hard we work towards a future life. And if we realize that there are future lives, if we realize that there's liberation and enlightenment, well, no question that our practice will be much more effective. All right, having said that, just in general, if we cognize both types of goal, so here, well, first of all, as I said, a well-founded faith in their existence is enough, but cognizing both types of goals differs significant benefits, as such realization can substantially strengthen our aspiration or even solidify our determination. So not just aspiration. Aspiration, as the English word also says, in Tibetan it's dumba. Dumba kind of means it's more than a wish. It's more than a desire. It's a really strong, it's like a seeking. It's like the strong wish, the strong aspiration. But then even stronger than that is a determination. That's even greater than that. So you may have noticed when we do the meditation in the very beginning, I talk about affectionate love, I talk about great compassion. Those are aspirations. We wish for something very strongly. But then the altruistic attitude, that's a determination. So there's a kind of a progression here. Now, similarly, when it comes to focusing on the future, focusing on what lies ahead after our death, which is it's not long until we die anyway. I mean, let's face it, 80 years from now, I think we're all gone. Yeah, we're all gone. Pretty certain that we're all dead by that time. So therefore, it makes sense to focus on right now. What lies ahead? What am I aiming for? Okay, so to have not just an aspiration to be reborn in a higher state at the very least, but actually the determination. But anyway, so when it comes to now understanding, realizing, comprehending higher rebirth and the highest good through reliable cognitive processes, so not just thinking about them and just in a vague kind of way, no way will be actually comprehend higher rebirth and the highest good. So it's important to go through certain steps. But anyway, the order of the two is reversed. First, higher rebirth. Well, no, the order is reversed in the sense first, the highest good is explained, or the highest good. We think about the highest good. We try to understand the highest good before we can understand higher rebirth. Why? Well, this difficulty originates or stems primarily from the fact that the cognition of higher rebirth requires understanding the law of karma and its effects, while the cognition of the highest good involves realizing emptiness. Okay, so most important here, understanding that liberation and enlightenment are possible. So in other words, understanding liberation, understanding enlightenment means we have to realize emptiness. You can only understand, you can only comprehend, you can only realize liberation and enlightenment if you have realized emptiness first. So that's what we're interested in philosophically. Why is that the case? In the case of higher rebirth, well, we first need to understand the law of karma to a certain degree. So of the two, the law of karma and its effects is more difficult to ascertain than emptiness, as emptiness is only slightly obscure, slightly hidden, whereas the law of karma and its effects is very obscure. Now, this is an important concept in Buddhism. Many of you are familiar with it, but anyway, if you're not, well, I'm going to explain it here, and if you are, I don't think there's any problem repeating it because it's repeated all the time in many texts. It mentions exactly this. So first of all, it's important to note that according to Buddhist epistemology, phenomena, so from the point of view of how to know things, it's important to understand phenomena are classified into three categories based on their degree of obscurity or difficulty in being understood. As we all know, learning about Buddhism, studying Buddhism, reflecting on Buddhism is very much about understanding reality. And so it's of course important to know that there's some things that are easier understood and some things that are more difficult. So in our practice, our understanding of reality progresses through these categories, generally starting with the ones that are immediately evident and advancing to those that require deeper levels of insight and realization. So this is in general true, not in all cases, but in general, I guess you could say this is true. So we start with the easier phenomena that are easier understood, that are relatively easily understood, and then we kind of progress towards more difficult phenomena. Anyway, the three categories are evident phenomena, slightly obscure phenomena, and very obscure phenomena. All right. Evident phenomena refer to aspects of reality that are directly perceivable by our sense consciousnesses. So, of course, that's pretty straightforward. Colors, shapes, etc. The objects we perceive on the daily basis, or that are commonly understood by our mental consciousness with no need for deeper analysis. Of course, there are more objects than sense objects, but yeah, certain states of mind we experience, for instance, core states of mind we know when we're sad, when we're happy, and so forth. These are states of mind that we know, and they don't need any deeper analysis. Examples include everyday sense objects such as a table, the sound of rain, and so forth. Other examples are our personal gross experiences and gross mental afflictions. I'm saying gross or coarse mental afflictions because there's subtler ones we may not be aware of. subtle anger we may not even be aware of. So anyway, anger, for instance, they are evident to our mind, while those of others usually remain obscure. So we're aware of our own mind, but of course, the anger, the afflictions of other people, of other sentient beings, they are obscure to us. Anyway, these are evident phenomena. And then there are slightly obscure phenomena that are not perceivable by our sense consciousnesses. So they may appear to our sense consciousnesses, but we're not aware of them. We cannot perceive them. We're not aware of them. We don't know them. Or so they're not perceived by our sense consciousnesses or commonly understood by our ordinary mental consciousnesses, but they can be inferred. We can use reasoning. For instance, fire in our neighbor's house. Usually the Tibetans say fire on a mountain pass where you can't really see over the top. So there is a fire burning there, but it's too far away, and I don't know, the rocks or whatever obstruct you seeing that fire, but the smoke is an indication based on which you can infer, you can come to know that there is fire. Similarly, your neighbor's house, you can't look inside your house, but there's this particular quality of smoke billowing out of the neighbor's house, and you can infer that there is fire in sight. And we use this all the time. We're not always inferring correctly, but oftentimes we do infer correctly, and a lot of scientific discoveries are based on such inferential understanding. Okay, so anyway, these are slightly obscure phenomena known that can be realized by an inferential cognizer, or can be realized by a mental consciousness that is usually described as an inferential cognizer. So such an inferential cognizer, such an inferential mind that infers correctly, knows on the basis of a reason, is developed by means of logical analysis and reasoning in dependence on evident phenomena. Examples include subtle impermanence, emptiness, and dependent arising. That's good news. It's difficult to realize impermanence. It's difficult to realize emptiness, but they're all only slightly obscure phenomena. So they're not extremely or very obscure phenomena. And then you have the very obscure phenomena that refer to the most subtle and profound aspects of reality, which lie beyond the reach of both sense perception and the inferential cognition of just slightly obscure phenomena. To cognize them, we must rely on authoritative scriptural passages by the Buddha or other realized masters. This reliance, in turn, requires understanding how these scriptural passages are reliable and authoritative in terms of the following factors. So their discussion of evidence, slightly obscure or very obscure phenomena, must be free from contradictions, both in their explicitly and implicitly presented assertions, as well as in their earlier and later wording. So this is a little complicated, but I literally took it from the philosophical text. So it's basically saying slightly obscure phenomena, they're pretty straightforward, but when it comes to very obscure phenomena, it's not easy, and it's reliable passages. So explanations given by the Buddha or other realized masters, they can help us to understand them. But to what degree we really understand them, that's debatable. I mean, when it comes to the subtle working of karma, to fully understand this, you have to be Buddha. So there's certain things, it's really hard to this is, very much debatable, like how much do you really understand this? You can completely understand emptiness, dependent arising, impermanence, because they're only slightly obscure phenomena. But the subtle working of karma, what another person is thinking. All right, so through certain clairvoyances, you can come to know, for instance, to a certain degree, as an ordinary person, what someone is thinking. I mean, even as an ordinary person, you can develop certain mental abilities. But those are still very much limited. And when it comes to, like I'm saying, these very subtle ideas or subtle concepts of karma, extremely difficult. But anyway, you rely on certain texts. And how do you know these texts are reliable? Well, when it comes to these texts discussing evident phenomena, slightly obscure phenomena, or very obscure phenomena, well, first of all, there's no contradiction. Must be free from contradiction. Contradiction both in what they teach explicitly and what they implicitly teach, as well as in their earlier and later wording. So in terms of explicitly teaching, implicitly teaching, earlier explanation, later explanations, if they're free from any kind of contradictions, then we can say they're reliable. But this is still debatable because it's so hard to really give a precise definition. But anyway, this is how it's usually explained in the text. So, having gone through these three phenomena, evident, slightly obscure, and very obscure, well, in brief, the highest good is explained before higher rebirth in terms of their order of cognition. So we talk about liberation and enlightenment first when we talk about cognizing them, understanding them, because it's easier to understand liberation in Buddhahood than it is to understand rebirth in the human or celestial realm. Why? As I said before, this is because the realization of emptiness, which is required for understanding the highest good, is easier than comprehending the law of karma and its effect, which is necessary for understanding higher rebirth. Okay, Ori, you raised your hand.
Yeah, when you say understanding, to what level do you refer?
Yeah, what do you mean with understanding? Okay, realize. So I've used a few words here. I've used them interchangeably. I've used to realize, to incontrovertibly know, or just to know, to understand, and to comprehend.
Is
I think
it like intellectual understanding or grasping? Because I think to directly realize emptiness, it's not that easy.
No, I'm not talking about directly understanding. I'm not talking about directly understanding. To understand, well, first of all, I think it's important to understand that when we speak about knowing something or understanding something, we have two minds that can do that. Sense consciousnesses, so a sense consciousness and the mental consciousness. So sense consciousness is when we look around. We know there's blue, we know there's yellow, and so forth in general. Of course, if someone is hallucinating, that's different, or if they can't see clearly. But let's talk about a healthy person who can see clearly, so they know I'm seeing blue, I'm seeing yellow. How do you know that they know? How do you know they realize or they understand in that moment? I mean, we may not, maybe we don't use the word understand in that context because it seems to be more used with a mental consciousness, but just realizing, knowing means that.
I'll do it a little bit simpler. Let's say when you try to teach.
No, let me finish. Orit, sorry, let me finish first. Okay. So anyway, so to realize with the sense consciousness, what does it mean to realize? It means that no matter what someone else tells you, you know what you know, in other words. It's incontrovertible. So you're not going to doubt because you know I saw this, right? Doubt won't arise as long as your memory, your recollection of that experience of seeing this phenomenon or knowing this phenomenon is there, you don't doubt it. Okay. Now, taking the mental consciousness, it's in our case always conceptual. For an ordinary person, it's always conceptual. Now, in this case, it takes more time. Well, unless it's a state of mind that's easily recognizable in our own continuum. I know I was angry yesterday. I was angry. I know I was angry. You can tell me I wasn't, but I know I was, right? You remember yesterday, for instance, yesterday I was angry. I was angry from 11 to 12, whatever. So I remember that. Whatever you tell me, I know it's true. So it's incontrovertible. It's incontrovertible. I know for sure. Or, you know, I study mathematics, for instance, and I do this. I don't know. I know 2 and 2 is 4 at some point. You can tell me whatever you want. I know 2 and 2 is 4, right? I know. I've come to the conclusion. I've got 2 cakes here and 2 cakes there, and you tell me it's 3, but I can count there's 4 of them, right? Okay, do you wanted to say something?
When you said the example with the colors, I had the thought of when like the books that little kids have. This is a horse, or this is a donkey, or this is a dog. You know, all of them looks more or less the same. And then they learn this is this is that, and this is that's.
Oh, sure. I mean, these objects are labeled, of course.
No,
Monkey is
just about what you said about the colors. That's it, like the blue, white, yellow.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So anyway, having said this, and this is like every day, I talked more about everyday kind of phenomena that we know. So what does it mean to know, to understand, to comprehend, to realize? And as I'm saying, I'm using this word interchangeably. It means no one can convince me otherwise. They can tell me anything they want. I know 2 and 2 is 4, right? And I can go back and again establish that this is the case.
Yeah,
All
but
right.
higher good you can only know after you've seen emptiness without a doubt. So before it's just you think that you understand, or I think that I understand this or that.
Whoa. I didn't talk about emptiness yet. I'm talking about easy things, right?
Yeah,
I
you
talked about
said 2
just
and 2,
everyday.
no doubt. So
Yeah.
that's what.
So once I've understood, then I don't have any doubt. Once I've understood, that's what I'm saying. What does it mean to realize? Once I've realized this, I have no doubt. I'm no longer even convinced. Your conviction has been taken over by an understanding, right? So we say we have conviction. I'm convinced, but a Buddha is not convinced. A Buddha knows, right? So in the same way, once we know emptiness, so right now it seems impossible. For us, it's really difficult, but you can come to the same understanding that phenomena don't exist inherently as you can come to the understanding that 2 and 2 is 4. It's just a longer process. It requires a lot of analysis, a lot of meditation, and so forth. But at some point, you are not just sure, you know. And that I would call the realization of emptiness. But that's still conceptual. I'm not talking about experiencing emptiness, directly perceiving. That's a whole different area because on top of knowing emptiness, you need a very deep level of concentration at the very least. So even without going into that, experiencing emptiness is like a totally different thing because it's not enough to just know emptiness. I'm talking about the first stages. And here I'm talking about this in general, speaking about higher rebirth, cognizing liberation and enlightenment. I'm just speaking about good old conceptual understanding. When do I know? When do I know? When no one can convince me or can lead me to think phenomena are inherently existent, right? So it's the same kind of certainty. So the word certainty is often used in Tibetan. You're certain. There's certainty because you realized it. You're not convinced. You're certain, right? It's a higher degree of being definite, which is the certainty. So being certain about it because you've known. That's an important question. This is an important question, and we debate it, but it's important to really understand. Like even there's not that much debate on it, but because well, you just say you're certain and no one can convince you of the opposite. But yeah, saying that we still need to fully understand what that means, in other words, right? Okay, so oftentimes we think we know something. That's our problem. The way we use language. I love it when someone, I don't know, says, I knew I was going to die. That's, if someone tells me that I knew I was going to die and they're telling me that, they never knew they were going to die because they just told me they knew they were going to die. You know, when I say, oh, this guy came up to me with a knife and I knew I was going to die. And I'm like, I'm so trained in philosophy. I'm thinking, of course you didn't know. You thought you were going to die, right? But anyway, we use the word know, understand in a very loose way. Most of what we think we know, we don't know. We just believe it. I keep saying that. Just because you Googled it, it doesn't mean you know it. You know that someone wrote about it. You know the information, but you don't actually know. I would claim that with the exception of the sense objects we perceive on a daily basis, there's a lot more things we're convinced of than that we actually know. I don't know, with this 90% of, I'm saying, with the exception of the sense objects we perceive on a daily basis that we actually directly perceive, everything else, 90% of what we think we know, we're just convinced of. And it's fine. We don't need anything more. I can be convinced of gravity and not drop my cup, right? I'm aware of, I'm not going to jump off a building because I'm convinced that there's gravity. And it's enough. But when it comes to emptiness, unfortunately, it's not enough to be convinced. Simply because the self-grasping mind is so powerful. It's so powerful that even realizing it conceptually is not enough. So that's important. Anyway, having said all this, here we speak about the cognition of higher rebirth, the cognition of liberation and Buddhahood, and we're speaking about conventional understanding, conventional realization. Okay. So I still got some time. I hope I didn't go too fast. This contrast in ease of comprehension leads us to the following key points. Okay, so some things are more difficult, some things are easier. The cognition of the highest good must be preceded by the realization of emptiness. The cognition of higher rebirth must be preceded by the realization of the law of karma and its effects. I've already said that, but just to now very precisely go through each aspect and explain why. And we're not so interested in the second part. The explanation is pretty short. This is important. The cognition of the highest good must be preceded by realizing emptiness. And this takes us through the entire path, basically, but in a short kind of way. Oh, my formatting wasn't very good. There should be a space, but somehow, anyway. All right, so the cognition of the highest good must be preceded by realizing emptiness. In other words, if I want to understand liberation and enlightenment, if I really want to understand it, I need to understand emptiness. So the fact that the understanding of the highest good is preceded by the realization of emptiness needs to be explained in terms of the two types of highest good, liberation and enlightenment. So let's look at liberation first. Now I want to know, what do I need to understand liberation? It's more than just emptiness, but emptiness is a huge part of it. What is it exactly? What is it exactly that I need to know to incontrovertibly know liberation? First of all, liberation is the cessation of all afflictive obstructions, of all afflictive obscurations. Again, what are afflictive obscurations? Does anyone want to answer this week? What are afflictive obscurations? What are afflictive obstructions?
Disturbing emotions. Disturbing emotions.
Is that it? Are disturbing emotions or mental afflictions, are they the same as afflictive obstructions or not? Are they synonymous?
And ignorance as well.
Is ignorance not a mental affliction?
It is a mental affliction, yeah, sure.
So ignorance is an afflictive obstruction and ignorance is a mental affliction. Okay. So first of all, ignorance, anger, all these harmful mental states, mental factors, they're all mental afflictions. I don't want to use the word disturbing emotions because ignorance is not an emotion. So the word disturbing emotion is too narrow. It doesn't include all kleshas. So now I'm just going to use the Sanskrit. It doesn't include all the kleshas. It doesn't include all the mental afflictions. Okay, so mental afflictions is the term I'm going to use here. But are mental afflictions and afflictive obscurations or afflictive obstructions the same or not? Are they equivalent or not? No. Is whatever is an afflictive or whatever is a mental affliction, is it necessarily an afflictive obscuration or afflictive obstruction? Yes, Orit is nodding. I can see. An afflictive obstruction is whatever is an afflictive obstruction necessarily a mental affliction? No. Give me an example.
But you said last time the seeds, the imprints.
You remember. Very good. Good.
Yeah.
The seeds. Okay. All right. Is that clear to everyone? So the only thing, so you have the afflictive obscuration, I have a hard time. These words are so long. The mental afflictions, they're all afflictive obstructions. But there's another category of afflictive obstructions that are not afflictions, that are not mental afflictions. What are they? The seeds. The potential of, for instance, anger to arise. Right now, I'm not angry. Right now, I don't have anger in my mental continuum. But anger can arise at any time because the potential of anger to arise is there. And that is the seed of anger. So my anger and the seed of my anger, they're both afflictive obstructions. Therefore, afflictive obstructions has two categories: all the mental afflictions and their seeds. Those I have to overcome to become liberated. So liberation is simply said, the cessation of all afflictive obstructions. Liberation is not a place. It's not a restaurant. It's not. Anyway, I mean, there are some restaurants here around here. They're called liberation, whatever. So it's not a place. It's not a state of mind. It's actually just the cessation. It's the lasting elimination of afflictions and their seeds. Okay, so that's important to understand. So achievable only through the elimination of the root mental affliction. So we have many mental afflictions, but the root is the ignorance that grasps at the inherent existence, the inherent or objective existence of phenomena, together with the seeds, again, of this root ignorance. The eradication of this root misconception entails the automatic elimination of all other afflictions and their seeds. It's automatic. So you don't need to do anything else. If you eliminate the root ignorance, you automatically eliminate everything else: anger, attachment, and so forth. That's a very important point that probably most of you understand, but I just want to stress it again. So eradicating, overcoming this root misconceptions entails the automatic elimination of all other afflictions and their seeds as they originate from the fundamental ignorance, from the root ignorance, and cannot arise again once that ignorance and its seeds have been removed from our mental continuum. So in other words, if you remove ignorance and its seed, you automatically remove the other afflictions and their seeds. Okay, so that's pretty clear. Liberation is the cessation of all afflictive obstructions attained by eliminating the root mental affliction. Okay. The cessation of the afflictive obstructions, in turn, what happens when they're all gone? Well, that stops the creation of contaminated karmic actions, thereby ending cyclic existence and the various forms of suffering caused by karma. So once you've eliminated the afflictive obstructions, you no longer create contaminated karmic actions, and you no longer create the causes for cyclic existence. And of course, you overcome suffering. That's why we're so interested in the root ignorance. To fully grasp the cessation of the root ignorance and thereby liberation, we must understand two processes related to the Four Noble Truths. Okay, so now we're coming down to the Four Noble Truths. First, the process by which the root ignorance causes suffering. How does this work? What is this process? So basically, it illustrates how the mental afflictions and karma give rise to cyclic existence and the different kinds of suffering associated with it. This is not the time to go into it. There are a lot more details. First, there's the root ignorance, then there's self-centeredness, there's the exaggerating attitude, I should add, actually. First, there is the root ignorance, then there's the exaggerating attitude, then there's self-centeredness. That gives rise to other exaggerating types of attitude, other exaggerating attitudes, which give rise to anger, which give rise to attachment, and so forth. It's a very complicated process. But just to know for now, root ignorance gives rise to all the other mental afflictions. They in turn give rise to karma and then all the suffering. Okay. So that's one process we have to keep in mind. To really understand liberation, we have to understand the first two truths, in other words, which are here reversed. The order, the sequence here is reversed in terms of their arising. First, you have afflictions and karma, the truth of origin, and that gives rise to the truth of suffering. But to understand liberation, we also need to understand the process of the truth of the path and the truth of cessation. How the direct realization of emptiness, and here I do mention the direct realization, that mind realizing emptiness directly, well, that gives rise to liberation. So this process basically demonstrates that the meditative equipoise directly realizing emptiness, the truth of the path, leads to the elimination of afflictive obstructions, truth of cessation. Okay. Now, we don't have enough time to go more into the fact, well, to go more into why understanding liberation means the understanding of emptiness. You could read in advance. It's really not that difficult. But yeah, we can go through it next time. I just want to quickly summarize what I talked about today. Again, we spoke a lot about the sequence of things, in particular here of the two resultant aspects, which are higher rebirth and the highest good. In terms of their rising, yes, we all know higher rebirth comes first, highest good comes later. Okay, but when we want to understand them, when we want to incontrovertibly know them, conceptually know them, well, first we can only know liberation and enlightenment first, and then higher rebirth. Higher rebirth is really difficult to understand, which is not a prerequisite actually for working towards them, but still it's very helpful. Now, why is that? Because higher rebirth involves the understanding of higher rebirth involves the understanding of the law of karma, and that in turn is very obscure. While the understanding of liberation and enlightenment, or the highest goods, liberation and enlightenment, the most difficult aspect we have to understand is emptiness, and that's not that difficult. Okay. Having said this, I briefly mentioned that in general, when we talk about how to come to know something, so epistemologically, or from an epistemological point of view, Buddhism talks about three types of phenomena. Evident phenomena, easily understood, doesn't require much effort or any effort. Then you have slightly obscure phenomena. They do require analysis and logic and so forth. So examples are emptiness. And then the very obscure phenomena where authoritative texts can help us. Of course, understanding that they are authoritative, and on that basis, we can come to understand. But again, I have my doubts that you really get a full understanding. And here it's very difficult. Orit would rightfully ask, what does that understanding mean? I think it's just a really coarse understanding, but I don't really know. I guess it's really subtle, so hard to really determine. But the point is, you have very obscure phenomena, and what do they include? The subtle working of karma. Okay, having explained all these, I then mentioned again these two key points that in order to understand highest good, you need to understand emptiness, while understanding high rebirth means you have to understand the law of karma and its effect. And as I later said, just knowing you're a human being doesn't mean you know higher rebirth, because as will be explained later on, it's not just understanding the amount of suffering or the absence of suffering. That understanding in itself is not sufficient to understand a higher rebirth. You need to also know what kind of causes, what kind of positive or negative causes gave rise to that existence to really understand it. And that makes it quite difficult. Anyway, we talked about the cognition of highest good must be preceded. Okay, so when we say cognition of the highest good must be preceded by the realization of emptiness, well, of course, taking liberation first as one of the two aspects of the highest good, well, here it's first of all important to understand how did we get, what is responsible for cyclic existence? How did we get into the state we're in? What are the processes that gave rise to our existence? And of course, here we're following the true truth, the first true truth. And then what is the process that helps us to overcome samsara, cyclic existence? Well, it is through the latter two truth. Understanding them, we can understand that liberation is possible. And you can apply the Four Noble Truths also for enlightenment, but this time they're called the Four Noble Truths from the perspective of the Mahayana. We're not that familiar with the Four Noble Truths from the perspective of the universal vehicle or the Mahayana, but you have Four Noble Truths from the perspective of the fundamental vehicle. Those are our ordinary Four Noble Truths, and you have them for the Mahayana, and they explain how enlightenment is possible, but that comes later. Anyway, I hope I didn't confuse you at the very end of this. Okay, so this was the summary. I would recommend you to read in advance a little bit or just go through the material again. And as I said many times, any feedback is helpful. Negative feedback, if you find it's too long-winded, it's too complicated the way I put things, it's not clear, just let me know. I can rewrite it or start from now on, keep it a little simpler. Like I said, I get carried away a little bit. Yeah, so any feedback is helpful. Negative feedback. Okay. Now we've got not exactly 15 minutes, but let's do a death dissolution meditation. I cannot go longer, Dalit. I cannot go 3 minutes longer, right? Because you've got some other program. Is that right? Dalit, where are you?
I can check.
Yeah, please do.
3 minutes, I think that it will be okay, but I had to check. So just a moment.
Or 5 minutes.
I don't think they have something afterwards.
You don't think?
They have Sunday, Tuesday, Thursday.
No, it's okay.
Okay, all right. I mean, any of you, if you've got to sign
can
out.
you stop the sharing that the people can see you?
Yes, of course. Oh, sorry, I forgot that. Yes, yes. Stop to share. Okay. Great. All right. So of course, if you're busy, you can just sign out anytime, but I'll just try to finish the whole meditation on the eight stages of death. All right, let's start right away. It's just a few seconds of mindfulness of the breath. So now visualize yourself lying on a bed and experiencing your own death. So first, your earth element dissolves into the water element, which means that your body feels heavy. You lose your strength and coordination. And your vision begins to blur. Then your mental consciousness perceives a mirage-like vision, as if seeing heat in the air, like heat waves just above the road or the sand. And then the water element dissolves into the fire element, which means your fluids dry up. So your mouth becomes dry, your throat feels dry. And your hearing becomes faint or muffled. And your mental consciousness perceives a vision that is like smoke, smoke rising in the air. And your fire element dissolves into the air element. Your body heat diminishes. Your hands and feet become cold. Your digestive system stops functioning. And you can no longer really smell anything. And your mental consciousness has a vision of sparks from a fire or fireflies that move like embers in the night sky. And then your air element dissolves into consciousness. So your breathing becomes shallow and irregular. You can no longer move. and your sense of touch fades away. Your mental consciousness has a vision of a dim, flickering light, like a candle about to go out. So your then the consciousness, number 5, is your consciousness dissolves into what's called the white appearance. So now your breathing completely stops. And your sense and bodily functions, they also stop working completely. All your mental activity, your ordinary mental activity, ceases. And you experience a white light, which is often described as a white sky or moonlit night. This is also your first experience of a subtler type of mind. Somatically, you're considered dead. Well, from a Buddhist point of view, you're still alive. The 6th level is the level of red increase. Your mind becomes even subtler, and you experience a clear red or orange light. Like a red light filling the sky. And you experience the mind of black near attainment. Which is even subtler. You experience a deep black void, as if falling into unconsciousness. And this perception of blackness is likened to a dark night sky without any stars. Finally, you experience the clear light mind, the subtlest type of mind you could experience. It's a pure state, transcending any ordinary perception. A perception that is said to be like seeing clear light, spaciousness. And it's accompanied with a deep sense of peace. And now use this mind of spaciousness, of clarity, and deep inner peace to focus on the lack of any inherent or objective existence. Nothing exists in and of itself, neither the I nor anything else. Right. So then let's slowly rise from this meditation. And then, of course, dedicate whatever positive potential we've accumulated through our study, reflection, and meditation. May it, of course, most importantly, help us to actualize our clear light mind in such a way that we can eliminate all obstructions, actualize the pure nature of our own mind for the benefit of each and every sentient being. And may all the virtue we've accumulated cause our lamas to have a long and healthy life, as long as the Dalai Lama and all other great lamas were still with us. And of course, may all the virtue we've accumulated make a difference in this world right here and right now. May it help that all those who are captured and kidnapped be released now. And may all the suffering on both sides, all the hurt, pain, fear due to the war, may all that fade away and be replaced by more wisdom, love, and understanding. So with this in mind, let's recite the dedication prayers. Through the merits of these virtuous actions, may I quickly attain the state of a Guru Buddha and lead all living beings without exception into that enlightened state. In the land encircled by snow mountains, you are the source of all happiness and good. All-powerful Chinrezig Denzin Gyatso, please remain until samsara ends. May the precious Bodhi mind, not yet born, arise and grow. May that born have no decline, but increase forevermore. Okay, thank you very much. That wasn't too long. Okay, thank you and see you again next week.
Thank you very much.
Geshe-ma. Thank you,
Thank you
everyone.
very much.
Okay, bye.
Thank you, Geshe-ma.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye, everyone.